This is the Tinker Toy project. We're going to learn a lot from this project. We're going to learn how to crosshatch, draw from a grid, crop, composition, maybe even some watercolor. This is the art project. If you're new here, please subscribe. If you find this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. So first thing we did was play with some Tinker Toys. Old or new Tinker Toys work equally well, but I bought a new box of Tinker Toys, like you see here, from Amazon.com, and I'll leave a link in the description below. So like I said, we played with some Tinker Toys and made some sculptures out of them. Then we took some pictures of those Tinker Toys using our cell phones. And when we took the pictures, we tried to make the images go off 3 sides of the page or more. You want it to go off the top and the sides and the bottom if possible. Then you can see there it goes off 3 different sides. Then once we got that composition, we also wanted to make sure that we had a dynamic view, particularly foreshortened or perspective, so that you're looking sort of down. So if you notice at the top circle is bigger than the bottom circle because of the view that we have of it. And then after getting a dynamic view, we did some editing on our phones. We hit the auto button to get the colors right, and we cropped it to a 4:3 ratio. This is the photocopy that I printed out, and then I made a grid on large paper. The grid is every 1 inch, so I'm marking every 1 inch, and then I am drawing a line that connects each set of inch marks, so that all the way across the paper I have these lines, and those lines are all exactly 1 inch apart. From the top to the bottom, or from the side to side, there's 24 spaces. And then I started marking it the other direction to create my grid, again every 1 inch. And then I connected those marks with lines so that they created the little squares for the grid. And it's really just like a giant piece of graph paper. From the top to the bottom there is 18 inches. And then I erased the lines in the border so that I would have a border around my paper, and I labeled them A through J or whatever it was, and 1 through 23. There's 16 boxes across and 24 down. I'm sorry, 16 across and 22 down, not including the borders. Now, I did the same thing with my smaller sheet of paper using 1/2 inch marks, or marking every 1/2 inch. So if you go from the top of the photograph to the bottom of the photograph, that's 22 and a half, I think. No, 21 and a half spaces. And then did the same thing going the other direction, which gave me exactly 16. Now I measured from the side of the photograph, not the side of the paper. And then again, I labeled them A through whatever and 1 through 23. 22, sorry, 1 through 22. And then I started drawing each square individually, 1 square at a time. Now, this is a very long process, but you should pay attention right here because I've sped it up. But what I want you to see is that I went square by square. And as I do this, it kind of completes a puzzle, square by square. Every time I do a square, a little bit more of the image is revealed. I don't know how to draw Tinker Toys. I'm not, fantastic at drawing anything, but I can definitely draw these lines and these curves one at a time in each of their individual squares. And when I put all of those together, it becomes a drawing. So, like I said, I'm going to speed this up a little bit. And it took me all of about an hour, maybe an hour and a half to do the entire drawing from top to bottom, not including drawing the grids. Once I got a significant amount of it drawn, I did go back and clean up certain lines, like make the oval's a little bit more rounder, a little more ovalier. I don't know how you say that. And on the line, like this one, I used a ruler to kind of straighten it up. Once I knew where it was going and where it should be going through each one of the squares, it was a lot easier to take a ruler and line it up and make it go the direction it was supposed to go and keep it straight. But I started one square at a time. I did not jump ahead. I go back from time to time and fix certain things as I learn new information on each square. Then it helps me to correct previous information that I'd already drawn. So I may go back some squares and fix things, but I'm not trying to draw an entire stick or a tinker toy or whatever the pieces are called. I'm not trying to draw an entire one at one time. I'm only drawing whatever's in that one square. So it's a long and laborious process, but like I said, it only took me about an hour and a half. Unlike some of my students saying it doesn't take forever, it doesn't take an eternity, it only took an hour and a half. An hour and a half of good, diligent work, which if your artwork is any good, then it will take you good, earnest effort to get it done, which is why it's called artwork. Then I started cross-hatching. Now, cross-hatching is a pretty simple concept. The idea is this. The paper is white, the pen is black. If you put lines that are close to one another, you're covering up the white paper, and the more of the white paper you cover up, the more the area looks black. Now, from a distance, your eye blends the lines together sort of and gives you the idea that it's gray. That's why you can look at certain parts and they seem to be darker than other parts, like right here where I'm adding lines. The more lines you add, the darker it gets. The more lines you add, the more white paper you're covering up, and so it gets darker. And so like on this thing, I'm just putting a row of lines, then I come back and put another row of lines on top of it. You'll even see that I take my ruler in a minute and straighten this up a little bit. That edge is very curved. Or not curved, but kind of crooked, very crooked. So I do take a ruler and kind of straighten that up a little bit and put more marks. But cross-hatching is just a matter of looking at the photograph and making it look the same value as what's in the photograph. I do take some liberties if I know that, because the photograph is really just a photocopy and it's kind of poor. Here I am taking that ruler like I said I would do and straightening it up. I did it right here too. But even though because the photograph is a photocopy and it's kind of poor, I am having to look at it a little bit closer and make some dark areas where the photograph doesn't really show it, but I know it should be there in order to make my drawing look better. And that just is something that comes with experience. And the only way to get experience is to do these drawings. You may mess up, but that's okay. You get experience from it. And every time you do it, you get a little bit better. Don't forget to stand back and look at it from a distance and make some decisions. They may not be in the photograph. In other words, like that area right there on that stick may not be that dark in the photograph. But in order for me to differentiate between the stick and that flag that sticks out there, I had to make it a little bit darker. So you may have to make some decisions that aren't in the photograph, but be careful about doing that. Don't just make anything up arbitrary. Make sure that you have made a good decision. Think about what you're doing and think about what it's going to look like and envision it in your mind, what needs to happen as you're doing this. And so, again, just keep adding lines until it gets as dark as you think it needs to be. Don't use the ruler at first, like I'm doing here. Don't use the ruler at first. Draw your lines, and then you can come back with the ruler and make those lines a little bit straighter. But if you use the ruler at first, I find that a lot of times you misjudge the proportions and the area of the square that it needs to take up. So I didn't use the ruler until after I had already drawn everything, and then I used the ruler to straighten everything up a little. I plan on coming back into this with watercolor, and that'll be in part 2 of the video. But I wasn't planning on doing watercolor in the Tinker toys. I was just going to do the background. Then I realized that in my first drawing that I did of Tinker toys several years ago, I had indeed watercolored the Tinker toys. So this is kind of problematic because if you'll notice on that really dark grid piece, that grid shaped toy down at the bottom, I've made it really, really dark because it was really dark in the photograph. Well, the watercolors are going to add a little bit of value to it as well. And so I've already made that probably darker than it needs to be. So before you start cross-hatching, you need to decide if you're going to color it in watercolor, which I am going to do. So here it is finished. Some close-ups of it. I erased all of the pencil lines, and you'll see in some places there is no edge at all because I erased the pencil line. But you can still tell what's there because of the hatch marks or the cross-hatching marks. You'll be able to tell even more about it when the watercolor is done. Now it is your turn. Go make some art. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up down below. If you have any suggestions on how I can make it better or what you would do on your project, please leave them in the comment section down below. Again, please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video.